Well, I think next on the list is
The
Murdaugh.
Murdaugh verdict.
So, okay, I'm not taking flack. It's just that there's people who watch this day in and day out, and they know every little detail, and they obviously think their opinions are the right opinions. I watched the Netflix 3-part series, not the HBO one, after the trial. And watching it after the trial, I followed the trial, but by no means daily like a lot of people. But I think I got the gist of it. I think Murdaugh is guilty. And in as much as I think O.J. Simpson is guilty, despite the acquittal, but I do appreciate all of the arguments for why his conviction, might have been rendered, notwithstanding it was not beyond a reasonable doubt. The arguments against the legitimacy of the conviction. I mean, there's a few big ones. They lied when they submitted to the grand jury about some of the evidence that they did or did not have as relates to the bloody shirt. There's no direct forensic evidence, or I should say, there's no forensic evidence. There's no weapon. There's only ballistics, in as much as they're reliable as to the nature of the shots, that they reflect firearms that are owned or were owned by the Murdaughs. And then, those are pretty damn strong arguments to say there's reasonable doubt to avoid a conviction. The flip side is you have an accused who lied about the most essential element of his otherwise, airtight alibi, as having fallen asleep and not been at the scene of the murder within moments of the murder. There's also the argument that they don't know exactly what the time of death was. They just have a window because of when the cell phones went dead and when he discovered the bodies. He lied about not being at the scene of the murder, within proximity to the murder. This is a guy who has systematically lied in all respects. The day of the murders is confronted by his partners at the law firm as to having embezzled, stolen, defrauded $9 million from the law firm. One of his kids killed Mallory Beach in a boating accident. The other kid is suspected to potentially have been involved in the beating death of a potentially his lover in 2015. The wife allegedly might have pushed the babysitter down, the housekeeper down the stairs and killed her. I was like, hey, okay, you might say there's room for a reasonable doubt. All things considered, I mean, geez, if this guy's not the murderer, well, somebody's going to get off scot-free, luckily. But what's your take on the entire thing? I mean, I think I know, but what's your take?
So, I mean, I'm not surprised by the jury verdict. My view generally is that jurors make up their mind before they sit down. They don't often realize that, but, having done lots of not only jury trials, but mock juries, which really allow you to explore this, to explore what biases they may have beforehand and then before they hear the facts and so forth, you see this in live time. Given how short they deliberated,
3 hours, no questions for the judge.
And basically they admitted that they had made their decision within like 45 minutes, from at least what some jurors have said afterwards. Quite frankly, that's not a jury that did their job. So when you have a double murder trial where someone's life is on the line in terms of the defendant, and you have weeks and weeks of trial testimony, when you rush to a verdict, you didn't do your job. So every one of those jurors should be embarrassed. They should be ashamed. They should be humiliated, because you didn't uphold your oath. You violated your oath to those jurors. I say this even in cases where I think somebody's guilty, because if you do your job, you should take days to go. And what you should, I had a great conscientious jury in a case where they convicted my client. It took them longer to deliberate than the trial took. Mm-hmm. Why? Because the foreman, who I picked because he said he admitted his bias up front, which was amazing, and he ended up being the most deliberative guy, he wouldn't let them vote until he says, we're going to go through what are the instructions first. Second, we're going to look at all the evidence and how it fits those instructions. We're going to have a robust discussion to make sure we're reviewing this like the movie 12 Angry Men style, and then we'll vote. And that's a conscientious jury that takes its oath seriously. This jury did not, in my opinion, based on what we've heard so far.
I want to say one thing too. I saw Rockstar in there. It says, Vives, you believe woke Netflix BS? No, I'm just watching it in retrospect now. There's stuff in there that we all agree upon as fact. And everybody's saying like you get bias from this. The Netflix documentary did the best argument possible to raise the idea that it would have been one of the angry, disgruntled teenagers from the boating accident. It's not, The Netflix didn't really point to Murdaugh as guilty. I just have my own biases, which is when the guy lies about having been at the scene of the crime within very close proximity to it, given what else happened that day, given the fact that he lied about pretty much everything, it becomes, I know it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, it becomes, very reasonable that this guy, given opioid addiction, could have been out of his body when he did this. My
view is that on that, going to that issue, if I had been on the jury, I would have voted not guilty because I didn't see evidence beyond a reasonable doubt. In particular, I was focused on forensic evidence, like where are the weapons, where is the gun residue,
weapons?
Where is the blood that should have been on him, where is forensic evidence connecting him to the murders. And everybody that was attacking him for the most part was focused on him. And what I said very early on is that he's clearly a criminal narcissist. It's where I agreed with the body language behavior panel, that he was lying in the interview to the police, but I had a different interpretation of its meaning. I don't think it was because he committed the murders. I think it's because he's a criminal narcissist. And his first reaction is not to have a natural human emotional reaction. His first reaction is, how do I make sure the world doesn't know who I am and doesn't catch me for being an unemotional narcissist who's a drug abuser and criminal and thief on a regular basis, who's living a fake life and has my whole life. Like a lot of Southern prosecutors, just saying. This guy came from a long family of Southern prosecutors. Maybe coincidence, maybe not. But I have, and we highlighted from the get-go, the one piece of evidence that was the worst piece of evidence for him was him being heard on tape within minutes of when the government alleges the murders occurred. Mm-hmm. And so I thought him taking, as you pointed out, him taking the stand and admitting he lied was very damning. And I thought, and jurors have now confirmed that as well, clearly a tactical mistake in letting him testify. Now, maybe he overrode his defense lawyer's objections, because criminal narcissists often think they can fool anybody anytime. But you can have a criminal, as O.J. Simpson pointed out, he could be a criminal liar and not necessarily a murderer. OJ might know a little something about that.
Well, or OJ chiming in is the exact thing that a successful murderous narcissist might do. Here's my advice.
Completely. It's classic. Now, to the third question, are there appeal grounds? Tons. The only question is whether courts, basically this judge allowed everything in. And most legal commentators watching it and observing it, including Nick Rekieta, Good Logic, and others, Andrew Branca, legal vices, to be distinguished from legal bites. Legal bites bad, legal vice is good. Just saying. Is that this should not have come in. This was all, hey, this guy's a bad guy, please convict him. Even the jury said that that motive evidence wasn't very persuasive to them. They just focused on what you focused on. He lied about when he was there. We're going to say that means likely guilty beyond reasonable doubt. Also, it points out something I pointed out. You're hearing almost none of these jurors talk in terms of beyond reasonable doubt. If they think he did it, they're going to convict, even if it was by a preponderance of the evidence.
And that's, look, and people might get angry with me in the chat. I'm acknowledging that I think he's guilty, but whether or not they proved it beyond a reasonable doubt, and I understand the arguments, and especially 3 hours of deliberation. This is not a what's the other guy who ran the car into the people in Waukesha?
Oh, Waukesha, yeah.
This is not like a Waukesha type thing where,
because there was nothing for them to. It was undisputed that he did it. Basically,
that's that. So here I can understand. There's no direct evidence, although people might still debate forensic evidence. It's not
there was expert evidence that said the forensic evidence is inconsistent with him committing the murder based on the trajectory of the shots, the location of that, and so the fact that the prosecution didn't have their own trajectory expert tells me that trajectory expert is true. Because if you're the government, one of the things you want to do is put together how he did it.
But
they never did really. They never really explained that.
Did they not explain that he could have just been kneeling down when he shot? So
even that was almost it would be the weirdest way possible. And even then it would be difficult, and it was still inconsistent with aspects of the forensic evidence. And so and again, that's my point. The government had prosecution, they do this all the time. They put their own expert people. They're usually the ones putting one on that explain the trajectory evidence. They didn't. That was a huge red flag that their own people were like, actually, we can't produce competent expert testimony that's consistent with the trajectory evidence. So I think they convicted a criminal who wasn't guilty of this murder, and whoever did it probably having some beers in South Carolina tonight.
All right.
or
That-
maybe some margaritas in Mexico.